The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio once again. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode as we attempt to fix AEW. And after their ratings last night, we might need to get to work on that because their ratings were a little bit down again as well. But we'll see if we're able to solve the problems from AEW. And again, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, you should go back and listen to that because we explain our rosters and how all this has worked and why we're doing this. It's not really to poke fun as much as it is just to point out these guys have a lot of talent. And I think their problems could be fixed if there was an effort to make some changes. But joining me on this part 2, same as part 1, in the studio is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. I'm shooting to break 800,000 viewers for this my reboot of AEW. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. Hopefully Cage Match will also be pleased with your premium live event.
That's really who I'm booking for. Let's be honest.
Of course. Joining us from Parts Unknown once again is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Back by popular demand, I hope. We'll see how this pay-per-view shapes up that I created. It was hastily gathered together.
Well, that's probably makes it very much on par with some of the AEW pay-per-views that are booked. So I think probably should feel pretty good about that. But again, obviously we know AEW's got a lot of talent. This 2-part episode was basically a way to showcase some of that talent by creating 5 different divisions. We've created world titles for the men and women, mid-card titles for the men and women, and tag team titles for the men. We each booked a champion and 6 contenders in each of those 5 divisions last week. And now this week we are going to book our premium live event, pay-per-view event. But before we do that, we had to spin the punishment wheel, the TK punishment wheel, because Tony Khan, well, he does get criticism from time to time about some of his booking decisions, and he certainly has some things he likes to do. So mostly thanks to Chris. Chris, I think, came up with a bunch of these. I was able to chip in, I think, 1, but the punishments we could have chosen, and we'll let each person kind of tell you as they go through their card what punishment they ended up getting is, but whose side is he on? Tony Khan wants to spice up the pool of heels and baby faces, change the status of 1 wrestler from each division to accommodate him. At least 2 must be from a championship match. They don't write them like that anymore. One of your tag teams has had a falling out. Choose a tag team and replace 1 or both members with wrestlers from the singles pool. Members that were replaced must now be placed in the singles pool.
Kind of sad that your tag team had a falling out and both of them had to be replaced.
Just had to, just gone. Like
never again. No, I'm not a tag wrestler anymore.
Yeah,
Screw
it's
it.
kind of crazy. Night of Champions, 1 title wasn't enough for your champ. Choose 2 champions from your division to duke it out in a champion versus champion match. It is up to you to decide which titles, if any, are at stake or if any unification is possible. All in, 1 match from your card must feature all wrestlers in one of the divisions. This can't be happening. Ouch, one of your champions has suffered an injury right before the big show and must vacate their title. Choose how the title is passed on and create a new matchup for the event.
They're like in front of the big show and they get hurt. Like, is that what happened?
I assume he hurt them.
Oh, okay.
Potentially, and that's what happened. But the old switcheroo, choose men or women. The singles champion for that division swap their respective titles and change divisions. The long con. Mr. Khan wants to see some returns on his investments. Every wrestler listed on your roster must appear in your event through a segment, match participation, run-in, etc. Backstage brawl. A non-scripted fight is broken out backstage, leaving Tony to fear for his life. Chris wrote that. Just want to point that out. This has resulted in the suspension of one of your stars. Select someone from the AEW wrestler pool to replace them. This person must participate in a match. Keeping it fresh. Standard bouts are overrated. Every match on your card must have a different gimmick or stipulation. Cutting and then edge is crossed out and Copeland is added. Money in the Bank and Elimination Chambers are old news. Premiere a brand new match type to prove your chops to Mr. Khan. And Who Is That, which was the one I chose. I'm kind of proud of this one. Tony likes surprises. Choose a non-AEW wrestler from outside the PWI top 200 from 2023 with a cage match rating of at least 8.5 and either add him or her to one of your matches to replace one of your challengers. So, yeah, that one I think is going to come up a couple times tonight.
Spoiler alert. My guy has a 9.23 cage match rating and was outside of the top 200. So,
yes. And I also drew that punishment. And my guy has a 9.21 cage match rating and is outside of the top 200, but is 100% someone that Tony Khan will book for AEW. So excited to talk about that. But that'll be coming up a little bit later on. So we're going to start off with Chris because Chris did such a great job of writing these punishments and coming up with so many great ideas. We're going to let Chris present his card first, and then Mike and I will break it down and kind of see how everything's turned out. So, Chris, I turn the floor over to you.
All right. Well, I was going to wait until I had to kind of lay my punishment on everyone, but I kind of have to do it right at the beginning because I got strapped with "This can't be happening." One of my champions has suffered an injury right before the big show and must vacate their title. So I had a couple different ways that I could go with this. I could just, pick kind of a mid-card title, not really worth as much, and kind of have an easier bout to figure things out. But I wound up picking the big title, the AEW World title. I said Samoa Joe, unfortunately, had a horrible injury that has sidelined him indefinitely. Not sure when he's going to be back. And now we must hold a tournament with the remainder of our division. Thankfully, we picked 6 contenders. Otherwise, this would be kind of hard. So vying for this championship after Samoa Joe has his introductory period of, saying goodbye for now to everyone. We start kind of running out some of the names here. We've got Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, Konosuke Takeshita, and then finally kind of rounding that out, I went ahead and I brought in Bryan Danielson, and I wanted to switch him. I initially had him as a heel. I want to switch him to a face because we are also going to have MJF showing up, a returning MJF who will be, I had him as a face initially. I want to make him a heel now, kind of be more in line with Matt and Mike here. He's going to be returning, asking where his shot is, since he kind of got screwed out of it right before he had to leave there. And that's going to give us an odd number. So who's going to step up to the plate to face MJF in an opening tournament bout, but Pac?
I thought you were going to say Big Show.
So now we have our entire roster going. Match number 1, Pac and MJF. I imagine it'll be a great match, and it's hard to pick which one I want to go over, but it's hard not to have a returning MJF go over in this one and at least make it to a later round. So MJF is going to take the win here. Moving on, I figure we go ahead and throw in the AEW TBS title, the women's mid-card. And I have a lot of plans for a lot of the matches down the road. So I kind of wanted just a straightforward champion versus number 1 contender, face versus heel, Britt Baker taking on Athena. And I have Britt Baker retaining in this match. Moving on to the second of the tournament, we are going to have Kenny Omega taking on Bryan Danielson. In this one, I'm going to have Kenny Omega going over. We've talked about kind of Bryan Danielson being in the latter stages of his career. I don't feel like losing to Kenny Omega is out of the question or going to upset anybody. And that's going to be, that's a pay-per-view event, main event in itself. So Kenny Omega taking the win, moving on to round 2 in that one. Next up, this is going to be an interesting one. It's the AEW men's tag titles, and trying to think of interesting things to do with this match. I made it a triple threat tag match, ladder rules. So we've got the Young Bucks coming in, champion heels, Eddie Kingston and Claudio Castagnoli face number 1 contenders. And I'm also including the Guns just to get some young blood in there. Eddie Kingston, he kind of thrives in that extreme. Well, really, both Eddie and Claudio are great in extreme matches. I think they'll put on a hell of a show here. The Guns trying to prove that they're contenders as well. And kind of how I imagine this ending, just kind of off the wall, is one member of the Kingston Claudio team and one member of the Guns each pulling down a title. Confusion ensues. Young Bucks tipping over the ladder, only for the titles to fall into their hands and them to be named the victors by the referee, who is in utter just dismay at what's happening. Young Bucks retain in just a completely awkward manner that just begs further questions on follow-up episodes, which then brings us over to our final first round bout with the remaining contenders for the world title scene. That is Will Ospreay taking on Konosuke Takeshita. And in this one, I have Konosuke coming out over Will Ospreay. I know they just kind of had a recent match where Will Ospreay took the victory. I'd like to flip that and just surprise everybody with a victory for Takeshita, moving him on to the second round with Kenny Omega and MJF. After that, we can run right into the AEW TNT title picture with Kazuchika Okada and Hook. this was another one where we kind of talked about what we all expected from it, where it's just going to kind of be almost a repeat of Taz and Hook, where you have Okada out there, heel champion, Hook trying to make a name for himself, but probably his reach isn't as far as he's hoping it is. And Kazuchika just kind of knocks him around a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to be a complete squash. Hook is definitely going to fight and prove in his own way, even in a loss, who he is here. But I have Okada retaining the TNT title. At a certain point mixed in here, I do have a non-championship women's bout, and that is Mariah May, the heel, taking on Thunder Rosa as a face. This is kind of a match I kind of made up, just a lead up to it, where Thunder Rosa had been cost during a title shot that she had with Toni Storm, in which Mariah May got in the way, and it was kind of honored that, hey, you get another chance at the title. And she said, no, let me take out Mariah May first. Stipulation of this being, if she beats Mariah May does not get to interfere in her later number one contender match, regardless of who's champion at the time. She wipes the floor with Mariah May. There's a backstage segment. Toni Storm is not happy with her, tells her she needs to start taking notes if she wants to be her groupie, essentially. Moving on to the second round of the AEW world title scene here. We are going to have a surprise entry, someone who had been given a bye through the first round of the tournament, and that is Swerve Strickland. He's going to be popping over from the TNT title scene over to the world title scene, where he will be a fresh face taking on MJF. He's going to come out on top in this one, being a fresh body. MJF having a match recently, it's going to be hard for him to keep up. He's going to move on to round number 3. Right after that, we might as well have the next match of the second round in that tournament. We are going to have Kenny Omega and Konosuke Takeshita both coming in. I have them as faces in this one, so Omega is going to be coming out on top, and I kind of imagine this as them kind of rekindling an old fight that they used to have, but it's all respectful. There's no heel moves here. There's a handshake at the end, and they kind of move on. That leaves us with 2 contenders for the finals. So before we get to that, we're going to go over to the AEW Women's World Title. Toni Storm taking on the returning Mercedes Moné off of her new contract, featuring Mariah May, who took Toni Storm's backstage take notes line very seriously with a large metal clipboard and a pen to jot down all the things that a real champion does. I have Toni Storm coming out on top through some vile means. Mariah May getting involved, using her notepad for more than just taking notes and beating Mercedes Moné over the head with it. I don't want Mercedes Moné to just immediately get a free title pass, but I also don't want her to essentially just come in and lose cleanly or look weak at all. So I almost had to have some kind of run in, and Mariah May was perfect for that. So partially why I featured a match with her early in the card. And finally, we have our final round of the tournament with Swerve Strickland, who had that first round bye, still relatively fresh, going against Kenny Omega, who's had 2 matches so far. But Kenny Omega is going to come out on top in this one and become the new AEW world title holder. We're going to have the retaining champions, Young Bucks, come out now that he's returned from injury and kind of congratulate him, only for them to then turn on him, take him out, Kazuchika Okada to come out and kind of stake his claim as well for another title to add to his belt. And all 3 will stand over this newly crowned but lifeless Kenny Omega.
And that's the premium live event, the pay-per-view event. And just a quick recap before I throw it to Mike. Basically, 4 of your 5 champions are retaining. Okada, the TNT title, the Bucks, the tag titles, Toni Storm, the women's world title, Britt Baker, the TBS title, with Samoa Joe getting injured. A tournament is held that is won by Kenny Omega, and of course he gets beat up to end the show. That's going to probably happen again later, but tough way for Omega, but certainly as a baby face in your scenario, that makes a ton of sense. Mike, your overall thoughts on Chris's event?
It's easy to have Omega get beat up. It's just the crowd's going to be behind him. So just, evoke some sort of emotion from them. So I was kind of curious looking at cage match, just because that became an issue with my card. And Did you realize that Athena, her cage match average is 8.43 to Britt Baker's 5.74?
Wow.
Yeah, looked that up and it kind of shocked me, honestly.
I feel like the AEW fans, for some reason, don't care for Britt Baker, and I don't understand why. I think she's
a dentist.
Well, that could be. Makes her a heel, as you said last week. But
that's what I said. Callback.
That's kind of surprising that there's that kind of discrepancy between those two.
Yeah, I've obviously never put much stock in cage match or spent much time on it, but when you start hearing the names, you're like, I wonder what the internet thinks of that person. And, that's what better way to look it up.
So Chris, you'll probably avoid Reddit then after that match because the Reddit crowd's not going to be happy that Athena didn't beat Britt Baker, I'm guessing.
And I guess my other thought, too, is are you having maybe a little buyer's remorse on Mercedes Moné to not just strap the title to her right off the bat?
I'm in it for the long haul. I mean, I could see this going for a while. Like I said,
because I might be.
I don't know why I'm just so against immediate title reigns, although of course I did put the title immediately on Okada, so I guess I'm kind of a hypocrite in that sense. But
I'm not saying it's the wrong move by any means. I was just wondering if maybe the recent numbers coming out might have changed your mind on how you felt about her going into this event.
If I'm honest, I feel like she was more there because I felt she needed to be and not necessarily because I wanted her to be.
That's fair.
So yeah, buyer's remorse a little bit.
Be interesting to see how that all shakes out, both in the fictional world and in the real world as well for AEW. But a very solid event for your first time booking a wrestling card. I think you did a pretty good job, and we'll certainly, if we pick up on this somewhere down the line, we'll have to come back and revisit those choices as we go on. We got 2 more cards to display for everybody. Mike will be coming up on the other side of this break, and then I'll be wrapping things up with my card as we go over part 2 of Fixing AEW as we book some pay-per-view events for AEW. We will get to Mike and my cards coming up on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, it is a part 2 this week of the Fixing AEW podcast as we take the rosters that we booked last week and now we put them in a pay-per-view event and try to come up with a great pay-per-view to showcase the talents of AEW. Chris has done that before the break, and we're going to get to Mike's picks in just a moment. Just a reminder, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our store while you're there, pick up your Nerdcast Empire merch. Just a reminder, we've got a ton of programming coming up over the next couple of weeks. Coming up on Monday, it's Music Monday once again as we take a look at the music from March the 15th. Another really great week in music. Really looking forward to that. So Music Monday coming up on Monday. Next weekend, we're going to have 2 wrestling podcasts for you. We're going to review both nights of WrestleMania. One will be on Saturday night. One will be on Sunday night. You'll see those podcasts hit online the moment I get them edited. So one will drop sometime early Sunday morning. The other will drop sometime early Monday morning. Luckily, I suddenly have a bunch of time to be able to edit those things. So we'll get those out right away. And then, of course, later that Monday, you'll have Music Monday once again with the music from March the 22nd. So a lot of great stuff coming up on the Nerdcast Empire. But it's time to get to Mike's booking. And Mike, you will have the opportunity now to put on your own pay-per-view to showcase your AEW talents. What did you come up with?
Yeah, let's do that. First off, the announce team, I'm bringing in Ian Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman because why not? That's
a solid choice there for sure.
I wanted to start the event off with something, a lot of action, just a hot match that also features my TNT division. So I'm looking at a fatal 4-way with Adam Cole, Malachi Black, Pac, and Konosuke Takeshita. 25 minutes or so of just nonstop ridiculous action with Malachi Black winning.
Nice.
Moving on from there, we're going to maybe slow it down a bit with my TBS title match of Julia Hart versus Mercedes Martinez. I wanted to go and throw in like a no DQ stipulation there just to give Julia Hart maybe more of a realistic chance of winning because Martinez is a monster. That being said, I do have Julia Hart retaining there.
That's always a good way to even the odds when you have maybe a smaller champion and a evil big challenger.
Yeah, and since I kind of have House of Black more on the face side of things, just because I think they're a really cool stable and they can do that, I think that kind of plays into her being smaller and a face against a heel Mercedes Martinez. Moving on to my TNT title match with Jay White versus Swerve Strickland. I have Strickland beating him in 28 minutes or so, nice long match, but nothing out of the ordinary, just straightforward.
I think it's a good way to elevate Strickland and put him on the top of the card and the mid-card title holder.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, if you look at like Malachi Black versus Strickland, that's something I'd like to see, so that's kind of what I'm setting up there. Moving on to the AEW women's title match, Toni Storm, the current champion, timeless Toni Storm even, versus Mercedes Moné. You know, I kind of went back and forth on this one, but it's really hard to compete with the character Toni Storm has put together right now. And even though I was the guy that said, if you're going to pay Mercedes Moné a stupid amount of money, you got to elevate her immediately. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I believe in that right now. And I'm not sure the crowd would either. So that being said, I think I'm going to have Toni Storm retain.
I mean, nothing wrong with that. She's on the best run of her career. So certainly keeping her as champion. Yeah, I think that's not a bad call.
So moving on to my AEW tag team title match, FTR being the champions, wrestling against the Young Bucks in a best 2 out of 3 falls match, which is going to be pointlessly too long, but I'm going to have FTR retain 2-1 in that match.
That'll be interesting, I'm sure, and probably hard to follow if I had to guess.
Yeah, I really wanted FTR to have that opportunity to really assert themselves as the top tag team. And what better way in a definitive 2 out of 3 falls, no flukiness. We're going to do this. It's going to be a ridiculous match. And it's basically going to be like 2 NXT TakeOver tag title matches from the glory days, like smashed into one. So it's probably gonna be like 40 minutes long, but probably worth it.
Yeah, I would think so. I think the crowd will love that match.
And moving into the title match, the AEW World Title, we have champion Samoa Joe versus Kazuchika Okada. That match is also going to be probably longer than Samoa Joe can feasibly wrestle at this point, given where he is in his career. But I'm going to have Okada beat him fairly cleanly. You think, oh, that's awesome. But then a returning Kenny Omega comes out to confront him. So, oh man, we're going to relive the glory days, this amazing rivalry. But then because this is AEW and
got to put a hat on a hat.
My punishment is, who is this? The lights go out. Oh man, what is it? Who could it possibly be? Well, since I'm now an expert in cage match and I know the kind of wrestlers that Tony Khan's looking to bring in, I am bringing in, when the lights come back on, ranked number 208 in the PWI top 500 of 2023 with a cage match rating of 9.23. I'm bringing in the Killing Machine, Takashi Sugiura. He's going to show up, lay out both participants with Olympic slams, and then we're going off the air.
Yes, indeed. The Killing Machine comes in from Pro Wrestling Noah and levels your main event guys to wrap up your pay-per-view event.
And now we don't know what's going on. Is this a forbidden door situation? Is Noah taking over? I mean, Sugiura has had a tremendous career since the year 2000, 4-time GHC heavyweight champion, 2-time GHC national champion, 2-time junior heavyweight champion, 2-time GHC junior tag team champion, and a 9-time GHC tag team champion. The dude is super decorated and clearly just phenomenal.
And it's amazing he hasn't been on AEW yet.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked. To me, it seems like a no-brainer as far as people that would be on Tony Khan's radar, since cage match is such a big deal. How this dude wasn't in the top 200 in 2023, I'm not really sure.
Well, he's obviously getting up there a little bit in age at this point.
Yeah,
so
that's
obviously
true. He's 53 years old.
Yeah, so he's not maybe wrestling quite as much as he did, but that's certainly an interesting event for sure. The ending is straight out of the AEW playbook, no question about that. The women's world title match, certainly an interesting decision that certainly makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty well booked show that I think would make the AEW fans pretty happy. Chris, let's get your thoughts on Mike's pay-per-view event.
I love the ending. I'd say one of the big issues is AEW really does want to bring a lot of these outside folks in, but your average viewer isn't always going to know who they are. And then you don't necessarily want to go the WWE route and have to have a 20-minute video package to explain who somebody is. So I think bringing someone in and having them lay out 2 of your top contenders right there in the middle of the ring is going to make them ask who it is, maybe look who it is, and give you a setup to kind of build this credibly. And I'm definitely interested to see how a main event title chain would look like with 3 people vying for it instead of just your typical 2. Glad you went the same route as me with the Toni Storm taking on Mercedes Moné and kind of coming out on top there. I know we've talked a little lowly about Moné as far as whether or not she deserves to have a title, especially that soon. But I think it speaks more just to Toni Storm's character and how just over she is. It's more so her benefit than necessarily Moné's detriment. But yeah, overall, great card. And I am especially excited for where we might go down the road if we continue doing this. A little Swerve Strickland, Malachi Black action.
Yeah, I would definitely look forward to that. And honestly, the Moné thing was kind of a last second audible when you were going through your card. And I'm thinking, man, now that I see what you're booking, I I kind of feel like that's the right move. Nothing against Mercedes Moné, but I almost feel like to some degree she has to figure out a way to maybe not necessarily reinvent herself, but to sell herself to the AEW fan base long term. Like someone like Toni Storm, I mean, she invented a whole new character to kind of elevate herself. And I'm curious to see if Moné could do something similar.
I'm going to take care of both of those problems when we get around to my event coming up. And I will say, in Mercedes Moné's defense, if she's not healthy enough to wrestle, they should have waited to put her on television.
Yeah.
Because the thing she does better than almost any woman in the world is wrestle. That is how you sell Mercedes Moné. Yes, she's a star. Yes, she's got the presence, but she can get it done in the ring. That's where she would win over that crowd. And she's not had the chance to do that yet, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But that's the real world AEW. We're not talking about the real world. We're talking about our fictional AEW that we're booking these pay-per-views for. And I guess it's time to get around to my pay-per-view event to wrap up this show this week. We are going to start off with a pre-match video. We're going to look back to our fictional Dynamite from this week. And
oh, wow.
Of course, we have the evil Mr. Khan, who has taken the evil Vince McMahon character, the Mr. McMahon, and that's what Tony Khan is now doing in this AEW world. And we'll flash back to his announcement that the next match that Adam Copeland and Christian Cage lose, they have to retire. They now have the Ric Flair stipulation. So that is going to set up our opening match, which is a 6-pack Hardcore Rules brass ring ladder match to become the #1 contender for the World Tag Team Championship. And it will be won by Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. They will defeat the Young Bucks, Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, Lance Archer and Big Bill, Pentagon and Rey Fenix, and borrowing from the singles division, Konosuke Takeshita was allowed to get into this match if Don Callis could find him a suitable tag team partner. So Don Callis, of course, has a lot of Japanese ties. So Don Callis went into Cage match and he went into the PWI ratings and he found a guy ranked number 231 in PWI with a 9.21 Cage match. Hailing from Hokkaido, it is Jun Kasai.
Okay.
So Jun Kasai, the hardcore legend, the deathmatch legend, will come in and be Konosuke Takeshita's tag team partner in this Hardcore Rules brass ring ladder match, which will, of course, become this bloody mess that Copeland and Cage will win in 31-55. It will involve fireworks and thumbtacks and everything that AEW hardcore matches have. But in the end, Copeland and Cage avoid retirement and they become the #1 contenders for the tag team titles. After that, unfortunately, you got to move on to the next match to follow that and that craziness. We're going to have a match for the TBS Championship. It'll be Chris Statlander winning in a fatal 4-way match over Athena, who was my champion, Taya Valkyrie, and Mariah May in 16-15. So congratulations to Chris Statlander. Good baby face, something the crowd will get behind, even though they may be a little wore out from that tag team chaos to open the show. Following that, Samoa Joe, who is my TNT champion, will retain that championship by beating Malachi Black in 1805. Kazuchika Okada is going to come down and confront Joe after the match, setting up their title feud, which will come ahead next. Then we have a backstage segment. It's funny that Chris kind of did this, but it's going to turn out a little differently in my case. Mariah May is going to ask Toni Storm why she didn't come out to help her win the TBS title. So we're teasing dissent there. Next up, MJF defeats Will Ospreay, Jay White, Claudio Castagnoli, Swerve Strickland, and Kyle O'Reilly to win a 6-pack brass ring ladder match to become the #1 contender for the world title in 26-50. MJF has come back. The fans love him. He wins the match. He's going to be the #1 contender for the world title. Number 7 is the tag team championship match where FTR will defeat Adam Cole and Roderick Strong in 23-15 to win the AEW World Tag Team Champions. Of course, Strong and Cole were my champions. Then they're confronted by Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. So you have FTR and Adam Copeland, who are real life great friends. Of course, FTR helped Copeland train when he was coming back to the ring. And now they have the realization that to keep their tag team titles, they're going to have to retire their friends. So we have that storyline built ahead. Number 8 on my list, the 6th match, Mercedes Moné defeats Toni Storm to win the AEW Women's World Championship in 21-55 after a ref bump because it's AEW. Mariah May comes down and turns on Storm, aligning herself with Moné. Moné wins and both beat her down after the match until Statlander makes the save. And there we have the turn. We have Moné now not having to get over with those fans as a babyface. She now becomes a heel, kind of a beginning an alliance for her. And then you have Toni Storm, who the fans love because they love this character, becoming a babyface. And now she will be on the chase to try to win her title back from Moné. Finally, in the main event, Kenny Omega defeats Bryan Danielson 2 falls to 1, a best of 3 falls match to win the AEW World Championship in 48-25. Danielson will win the first fall and Omega wins the last 2. MJF will come out and beat down Omega after the match to set up their upcoming feud. And we go off the air, and that is my pay-per-view event. Mike, your thoughts?
Poor Kenny Omega. Like, that guy is just...
He's too good a baby face.
Yeah, I feel bad because he seems like such a likable dude, and he's just getting laid out in everyone's event. Love the tag team booking. I think that was brilliant. As much as I was first like, okay, what are we doing with Copeland and Christian? But that makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, to some degree, Monet is just kind of a natural heel. I think she has that attitude about her that compared to a Toni Storm, who's just such a kooky character, you're going to want to cheer her over Monet anyway. So I think that works. Jun Kasai, that's,
if you don't know who Jun Kasai is, you should look up Jun Kasai. Some of the most just awful death matches, every weapon you could possibly think of, he's probably used. The one of his specialties is that like electrified ball bat wrapped in barbed wire. Like, that's a classic one from Kasai. But
it makes me wonder, was Nick Gage not high enough on the...
Yeah, I didn't check. I came across Kasai first. Like, perfect.
Nick Gage is a 6.61
so
average, so that would not have worked.
But when I saw Kasai was over 9, I'm like, yeah, that's the guy. That's somebody. And again, because you've got Moxley and Kingston in that match as a tag team, that's perfect. Because those 3 are just going to do the most heinous things to themselves and each other in that match. It's just going to be a bloodbath.
Maybe more disappointingly, Nick Gage is 175 on the 2023 PWI 500.
So he didn't qualify at all.
Nope, not at all.
That is kind of crazy.
He did finish lower than Bully Ray, who was 171.
Oh, wow. That's great to see Bully Ray.
And Omos, who was 174.
You mean 3? Like, he should have been up in the top 5. Like, but yeah, and the Monet thing, I just think she will make a good heel with that crowd because she can lean into this whole, well, I'm only here for a short time, and, basically put down AEW and pump up the place she used to be without coming right out and saying it. And that'll make her a heel with that crowd. The promo she would cut would be great. So I think it makes a ton of sense, and everybody will love the moment when Toni Storm overcomes her and wins the title back. It'll be a big babyface moment for her, who definitely deserves it. So yeah, that was my card. Chris, your thoughts on my pay-per-view event?
Yeah, I kind of talked about hoping that we continue this down the road, because this whole setup kind of lends itself to being almost a board game or a card game of sorts. And I'd say if we were to vote for someone other than ourselves for strongest pay-per-view, you'd have it for me. I mean, even if I was to have myself in the running, I'd still vote for yours. That opening is fantastic. I love how you're able to take kind of the real world storyline with Copeland, Edge, and FTR, and the way you were able to kind of spin it. So Mercedes Moné is able to get that initial title shot, but also have that double face heel turn that makes it a little more interesting than just, oh, she wins. Awesome. I wish I could have done more with my women's mid card, or really the women's division altogether. I was more kind of concerned with how many tournament matches I was going to have for that title, that I was going to run over on time if I put an egregious amount of matches. But I'm really glad that you brought Chris Statlander up, because before Samoa Joe lost, I was definitely trying to get her in the title picture as well. Once again, it's sad that Kenny Omega keeps getting beat, but I mean, that's just a great way to end the show there. So, I mean, front to back, I think you had an amazing pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun putting it together. And again, I think the one lesson I would hope, if anybody from AEW ever listened to this, that I think all of us did to some degree, is try to come up with some real logical stories. Obviously, we don't have the week-to-week television to build some of them, but if you don't have the week-to-week television, try to tell real life stories, things that make sense. I mean, the Adam Copeland FTR thing is perfect. Now, it doesn't have to be for retirement. Maybe they just end up on the other side of a feud and there's that relationship there. But, it's an easy way because your audience already knows this, and you don't have to do a ton of work to build up to it. And you're going to build that emotional attachment. It's not like this past week where they put Ospreay and Katsuyori Shibata on. I'm sure they, by all accounts, had a great match, but there was no story to it. So who cares in the end of it? I mean, once you've seen so many great matches, you don't need, it's hard to impress a crowd that just constantly gets shoved great match one after another in their face.
One thing I thought was a challenge about this was, even though we kind of talked about it being a clean slate, hey, we're gonna fix this, nothing before matters. it's really hard to remove reality from what you're doing. You can't look at these people and not take into account, or even the presence of Tony Khan. It's hard to book this kind of thing without taking those things into account. It does kind of affect your decision making.
Yeah, no question about it. And obviously it did in several cases, because I think it's the one lesson for all these bookers is that people are what you book them to be. I think so often you talk about, and this even happens in WWE, it's not exclusive to AEW, but it's like, oh, well, this guy didn't do real well in this company, or this guy didn't do real well. And it's like, but did you give him a chance to do well? Did you put him in a spotlight? Did you give him the opportunity? And sometimes the answer is yes, and it just didn't work out. A lot of times it's no. You're giving them 3 minutes here and a backstage interview segment there. Like, you can make me care about anybody if you work hard enough to build a storyline that works. And then once I care about them, you can do a lot of stuff to me then. Like, you look at what happened with Cody Rhodes last year. People cared about him so much. They were furious when he lost to Roman Reigns. But now, because of the way they have booked him since then, everybody's ready to go and ready to watch him win it this year. So it's all in the story you tell. It's a lot less about the match when you get there, because my guess is we're going to get bloodline rules in that second day, and it's going to be chaos. And nobody's going to remember the cage match ranking of that match if Cody Rhodes pins Roman Reigns at the end. That is the only thing anybody's ever going to care about, not the match quality. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's all about the ending. There's no question. And when you mention Cody Rhodes, you also think, as far as these people being who you make them to be, I didn't care when he left WWE the first time. That seemed like a non-story. It was kind of cool when he showed up at Ring of Honor or Impact for that one time. But it wasn't like, man, WWE's going to regret letting that guy walk out the door. Fast forward to now. Dude's the biggest babyface in wrestling.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a matter of the company not spotlighting a guy. And sometimes it's a matter of a guy realizing that what he was giving them to spotlight wasn't good enough. And I think with Cody, it was a little bit of both. They didn't really find something good for him, but he also realized that he was in a toxic place and that he needed to move on and do something different to rebuild that. And now he said he's the biggest star maybe in all of wrestling at this point, and people are excited about WrestleMania next weekend. So it's some of it is booking, some of it is, but more of it is storytelling. And I really hope that AEW, if they really want to fix their problems, honestly, they could do worse than Tony Khan walking out next Wednesday and saying, you know what, everything that's happened to this point is just completely gone. We're going to start with a clean slate and start over. It would be the craziest thing ever. But honestly, sometimes doing the thing you've been doing and it's not working is crazier. So
it'd be evil Tony Khan, right?
It would be. That would be great. And you know what? Why not have him there? Have the Bucks around him. Basically make your EVPs that are there in the company bad guys. Have them start dictating the matches. Like, again, it's not a hard story to tell. You just have to put in the work.
You're going to have to deal with Eric Bischoff saying that you copied him, but I think they can handle that.
It's so difficult to make a billionaire seem like the bad guy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because they're all so wholesome and nice. Like,
I just don't know if that's believable.
But I do want to just bring up, you mentioned, copying Eric Bischoff or copying the Attitude Era. Like, wrestling is a copycat industry. And so, we talk anime on this podcast. Anime is a copycat product. Like, you're going to take some story elements from something else. Some case you're going to just redo them with different people. Sometimes you're going to do a twist. Shawn Michaels is basically booking NXT straight out of 1990s era WWE.
It's his career, basically.
Yeah. And, who isn't excited for Trick Williams versus Carmelo Hayes? That was announced today as we're recording this podcast that will be the main event of Stand and Deliver, as it should be, because that could end up being the best match of the entire weekend. Again, there is hope for AEW, but they need to get their act together. They need to get offline, and they need to get focused on telling good stories, because if you can tell the best stories and have the best matches, that's when you can really take your product to the next level. They've got the advantage of having great wrestlers that can do great matches. Now give them a chance to have great stories so that you care about the results of the matches, and now you'll have something. Then it'll make sense. Chris, any final thoughts on this exercise of fixing AEW or anything else leading into WrestleMania weekend next weekend?
Yeah, this was super fun. I hope we can come back and do this, maybe even do it with WWE, get the real rosters down. I'm not against coding a little program to kind of split it up between us and have a little fun game with it. I'd say if I learned anything from this, and to AEW's credit, even just the small sample size rosters that we gave ourselves, it was difficult to try to include as many of these big names as we could, especially in my group having to come up with a whole tournament bracket. But just to think that AEW doesn't just have these people, they have a heck of a lot more people than what we have on our roster here. And I can see why they do have trouble getting all these big names featured and trying to figure out how to get them over and get storylines for them. And I kind of understand why they tried to make so many extra titles now. I don't really think that's the way, but it was an option. So I now understand better the difficulties they face with all these big names and contracts.
No question, this was a learning experience for all of us, and certainly something we'll revisit down the road. Mike, your final thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult things from my perspective in wrestling is how do you make a feud important that doesn't involve stakes? And you have to do it by some sort of emotional connection. And that's really difficult to build, especially with the exercise we did here, where we're basically taking things from square one and saying, I don't care about these people yet. How do I make other people care about them? It's interesting, but yeah, it'd be cool to revisit at some point.
Yeah, no question about it. I think there's even a process where the next exercise could be booking the Dynamite after this pay-per-view, and how does that show look after coming off of this pay-per-view event? How do you book 2 hours of that, even with just the rosters we have? Because I think you could book a great 2-hour show with our limited rosters, but it's going to be interesting to revisit. Hopefully you found this an interesting exercise listening to us do it. I'd be interested to see what everybody else kind of thinks of what we did and maybe what you would do differently. Certainly hit us up in the comments on social media, send us messages. We definitely love to see what everybody else's thoughts are. Maybe we'll share some of the best comments we have on a future episode of the Nerdcast Empire. But that's going to wrap things up for this week's Nerdcast Empire. Again, we've got a ton of content coming around WrestleMania. Make sure you check that out. Don't forget, tomorrow is Music Monday. That is going to be the music from March the 15th. Make sure you check that out on the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to the guys once again for joining me on this podcast. Big thanks to Stove Leg Media for their continued support of the podcast. We will be back in less than 24 hours time with Music Mondays. It's going to be really exciting. And then, of course, next weekend, it is all about WrestleMania on the Nerdcast Empire. It's going to wrap things up for the guys. I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.